Hello, every folks, and good morning! Welcome to a little bit of a chatty slideshow kind of thing here today. So look, there's been a lot of news recently about the Switch 2 coming out, immediately getting torpedoed by the, orange cloud hanging over the world right now. But similarly, there's been rumors floating for a while that there might be a PlayStation Vita 2 in development. There have been surveys going out ever since the Switch 2 announcement, and I wanted to essentially take a quick look at the Sony handhelds here, because for those that don't know, basically I've more or less done a foster care for these handhelds for a number of years, essentially just picking them up in all kinds of scuffed conditions and, fixing them up, getting them out there in the world, because I love these devices. These are something that I think held up incredibly well even to this day, and oftentimes it gets forgotten in, the swirl of, like, hey, here's all this new stuff, just how much these handhelds did right, and continue to do right to this day. Hell, the modding scene for the PSP and Vita has kept them very much alive to this point. I mean, there's still games getting ported to these things all the time. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into this thing a little bit. So, alright, first and foremost, as far as a Vita 2, oftentimes the thing that gets brought up here is like, well, the Switch is already doing so well, it's already dominating the whole market, and funnily enough, there is now an opening, because they went down a road that is bizarre for Nintendo, to be completely honest. Part of the reason that I think people were a little bit upset about them, because their whole thing was always taking the road less traveled, the sort of Blue Seas approach, so to speak. They always went for some weird gimmick that nobody else was doing, and that worked great with the Switch itself, and then with the Switch 2, they're going down the power route, and sure, there aren't too many other handhelds out there. Oh wait, there's the Steam Deck. So they kind of put themselves directly in competition with the Steam Deck, which is a little bizarre to me, but alright. I mean, they do still have the family market, obviously, but like, it is a weird thing to try and compare yourself to, because it's like, here's this thing that's possibly going to be anywhere between 50 to 80% less, depending on which way it ends up going, that potentially has games that are like, an 18th of the cost, and also, has quite a community behind it, is completely open to let you tinker with it as you will. Yeah, like, yeah, sure, technically Switch 2 might be a little stronger, supposedly, hardware-wise, but, like, this thing replaced my computer. Yeah, I'm literally recording off a Steam Deck right now. Like, it replaces your computer, it plays your entire Steam library, like, dude, that's not a fair comparison, what are you doing? Anyway, back to the PSP and Vita, though. So here's the thing. Oftentimes, things like playing on the TV, or surprisingly enough, I've even seen the Switch get attributed with inventing the sleep mode, which is a weird take because it's not even close to have invented that. But the PSP was doing a lot of this stuff over a decade before anything was going on with the Switch. Like, this is one of the reasons that I love these devices so dang much, because they were really innovative in a lot of the things that they did. In fact, everything about the design of this thing is pure magic. I hope whenever they do a Vita 2, PSP 3, whatever you want to call it, please, take the stuff that you learned from faceplanting on the Vita, because the Vita was an incredible device, but Sony shot themselves in the foot, and please bring back the pure creative magic that brought the PSP into being, okay? So first of all, before we even get into the software or anything, I want to talk about the device itself, the design, just how many things it can do, okay? So hey, you wanted to go and record you wanted to record your games, you wanted to play some local co-op or whatever else on any of your arcadey types or whatnot, you wanted to go play your RPGs on a big screen or what have you, right here. Right here, built into the device, is a video out function that basically can connect to any TV. As soon as I saw that this was a thing, I forewent buying a game for a while to be able to afford one of those component cables. My god, I love those things. They actually looked a little bit like this. So basically just this thingy shoved into the PSP's butthole over there. And yes, you got video output. They had ones that were the 3-prong or the 5-prong, depending on which kind of TV you had. But yeah, they actually worked really well. In fact, one of those funny, vivid memories from back in the day was this time when I was sitting around with an ex who had brought along a projector and her PS3, and then I ended up just like walking away from the room for a second, like, hold on, I gotta see this. So I go and I get my component cables for the PSP, and sure enough, widescreen Armored Core on a PSP. So that was pretty great. But yeah. So it has to be remembered that yeah, it was doing this stuff long before the Switch was doing it, and it was a really cozy idea. Now, granted, it was imperfect because it was hardwired because they weren't really doing the wireless thing that much at the time. But by the time they got to the PSP Go, they were actually, and they had little docks that you could put the Go into, and it could connect to PS3 controllers, and basically it was doing the Switch thing at that point. So it's just wild that this was already doing it back then. But for some reason, they didn't advertise it. Sony had this thing at the time that, like, the dock was just not the way to go for anything, so they barely advertised this feature. They barely advertised the dock that came out for the Go, or its ability to connect with Bluetooth controllers. So, yeah, it just kind of lay there by the wayside. They're like, here, we invented this thing that would have absolutely revolutionized stuff, and we're just gonna not talk about it. Okay, actually, funnily enough, as far as the video out function, you can still use the video out function, even if you don't have this, if you have a modded PSP or Vita at this point, because both of them did have this function. And that's actually one of the reasons that people enjoy modding these things, is because you can get access to these features that were otherwise locked behind weird peripherals. Because these docks, even if you can find them, they're hundreds of dollars at this point and may not even work. But yeah, you can just kind of connect a USB cable to them and connect it to your computer, and there you go. It's all good to go. Now, with that said, let's also talk about the sleep function on this thing, because it really did a solid job on this. So, obviously, at the time that the PSP first came out, battery technology was not exactly in the greatest place, but it was getting better. And so, usually the answer was to carry a couple batteries with you. That's what I did. I had one of the launch batteries, and I had one of the extended batteries, and I would just go and charge one whenever the other one wasn't in use, because I used to travel all the time. And basically this thing just never left my side. So as a result, yeah, I was always just swapping out batteries. Now, the thing is, those batteries would last roughly 2 to 4 hours, depending on what you were playing, which, compared with a lot of the devices of today, and especially the PlayStation Vita, was not exactly crazy, but at the time, it was pretty nuts. It was pretty capable for quite a decently long time there. And in fact, a lot of the replacement batteries that you can get today do actually end up lasting quite a good bit longer. I think the longest I've seen was one of these replacement batteries that I got off of iFixit randomly, that ended up giving it like an 11-hour battery life. So either way, that was those options are out there for you. Obviously, new peripherals have been added for these things over the years, but yeah, they had quite a decent battery life, but this meant that they also needed a sleep function, because more games were going to potentially be, taking you longer on the Vita, or on the PSP rather. And so the sleep function was basically a little kind of a springy switch that you would flick up, and then it would just go into sleep mode. And if you needed to, let's say, put it away for stowage or whatever else, you could actually lock it down here in order to prevent that switch from being moved, which didn't happen often. But I just appreciated that it did have a little lock on there. Somebody did think about this. On top of that, it's worth mentioning that this was actually a multimedia device, as was the style at the time. For some reason, everything had to be a multimedia device. So, for example, if you needed to, let's say, have it function as your MP3 player, you had an option for that over here. You could put all your music on it. It did its cool little visual lines and whatever else across the screen. So it was pretty cool. Additionally, the online play worked surprisingly well for this little handheld. I remember I used to play the occasional game of Worms Open Warfare 2, or what was it? Some Siphon Filter, whenever using hotel Wi-Fi. And yeah, it worked pretty darn well. And in fact, you can still use the internet functions to some degree to this day. You can still download your old games and stuff on your PSP if you just use your phone's Wi-Fi hotspot. They don't have security by default, so you can just kind of use one of those, which is what I do every time that I fix up one of these devices and, want to test it out with my old library and whatnot. Now, next, let's go ahead and speak about library, because this is also one of those things that actually carried forward throughout the legacy of these devices, because the ports that these games got, the versions of different games that these got, I feel went really underappreciated by people focusing on stupid things. Like, for example, we got... So, the Armored Core games, right? When it comes to the PS2 Armored Core games, there were quite a few of them, and they're notoriously hard to emulate, to the point that to this day, a Steam Deck on stock settings even struggles to run them without going and fiddling around with a few things, okay? Now, sure, there are ways to get around it for more powerful devices, but for the weaker end stuff, like your Retroids and stuff like that, they still suffer on even possibly getting those things to run. They usually end up using the PSP versions. And that's the thing, a lot of the ports that came to the PSP are oftentimes better than the original stuff that they were based off of, or in some cases are just kind of the definitive versions, as it were. So like when it came to Armored Core 3, Silent Line, and Last Raven, as far as I'm concerned, they are the definitive versions. What did people get in a fuss about? Well, technically the graphics were slightly muddied down, and then they completely forget that, like, when it comes to the graphics, they actually were sharpened. Technically, the resolution went down, but the graphics themselves look sharper. There's technically less particle effects, but they're also in widescreen now, whereas the original was 4:3. And many kind of completely forget that little detail. Like, yeah, you can actually see to your sides now, which is pretty important in a game where one of the main strategies is flanking. So yeah, you can actually get a much wider field of view in these versions, so as far as I'm concerned, they're far better. On top of the fact that they added new parts, they added new arena fights and stuff like that. So yeah, well, not to mention the due to the fact that it was going on technically weaker hardware, they actually simplified the UI to make it so that the menus don't take half a dang hour to load. So that's one of those other cool things that's going to come up repeatedly over the course of the discussion here for the PSP and Vita, which is a focus on efficiency over raw power. Because everything about them is basically about going and digging into the stuff that you really need, and then potentially just getting back to the fluff when you actually know how to get it on there. The nice benefit of knowing where your limits are is that you can start working on how to get around them, and that's where we see a lot of problems coming in from, especially like, you know, the AAA side of things right now, where they're like, oh, here's all this power, I gotta throw all this money at it, and what's it get you? Like some better particle effects? Like slightly higher FPS to the point that you'll never even realize it unless you're playing it on a freakishly expensive monitor? What's all that for? You know, it's just, it's a waste as far as I'm concerned. So as far as handhelds are concerned, it oftentimes had versions, again, of games that previously were there on something like the PS2 or whatnot, but it did a better job of potentially bringing that experience forward, understanding the important stuff. Like, yeah, would it have been awesome to see something like Ace Combat Zero on here? Sure, but 10 and whatever, I think it was like 10.2 or something like that, that they brought over to this thing was pretty darn fantastic. It got the gameplay part of it right, even if the story was kind of bare bones. You had stuff like, okay, it would have been nice to have Silent Hill 2 on here, but we do still have Silent Hill 1 as well as Silent Hill Origins, which, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I really enjoy that game. I don't know why it got panned a little bit when it got first released, because they're like, it doesn't have as depressing of a story as 2, which is fine, but it's also one hell of a creepy game. I think part of it also hits different if you actually were playing it while, you know, living on a moving truck for a while. Like, that whole feeling of, oh wait, the truck stopped and now everything's just gone completely to hell, just hits a little different, I think. When it comes to, like, GTA, Liberty City, and Vice City stories, I personally prefer those strongly versus the PS2, 3 and Vice City. I mean, I grew up with Vice City and everything, but, like, there's just more stuff, for example, from San Andreas and stuff, that got thrown into those games. So while we didn't get a port of San Andreas on the PSP, we did see a lot of its features brought in, you know, the different, like, parkour mechanics and whatever else you could do from SA, the ability to ride a bike around, all of those kinds of things. So as far as I'm concerned, it kind of translated both Vice City and San Andreas to a portable form factor, which is just really cool to me. On top of that, we had the Monster Hunter games, Metal Gear. Okay, Metal Gear oftentimes gets forgotten, like, just how many things it had on the PSP. Because sure, you still had the original MGS1 that you could get on here off the PSN at the time, but you also had Portable Ops 1 and 2. Oftentimes they get looked back at as like, oh, look, it's just janky PSP port. Please try them before you say that, because they are fully featured, trying to put MGS3 on this thing as hard as they can. Honestly, really solid games. Did they have some downsides? Sure, but really solid games all the same. It's really cool, the stuff that they tried to do there. And additionally, like, Portable Ops Plus, they turned Metal Gear into a roguelike. That is cool as shit, my dude. So, anyways, I really love those. I absolutely played them to death. But yeah, then one obvious answer there also is, you also got Peace Walker. All well and good. One of the most fully fleshed out Metal Gear games ever made in the form of Peace Walker. That oftentimes people would play through the story mode once and not experience the absolute insanity that is the, like, 200 plus other missions in that thing. Seriously, if you only played it through for the story, you have not experienced Peace Walker. Just go pick it up. Just go do it right now. But oftentimes what also gets forgotten is the Acid series, Metal Gear Acid 1 and 2. That time that they decided to turn Metal Gear into a strategy game, and it kicked ass. It was so dang good. I wish they would have revisited the concept at some point, especially considering we see so many card battler types that end up showing up right now, because that's basically what it was. It was an SRPG played as a card battler in the Metal Gear universe. They're just like, yeah, you know what? You can just order in an airstrike. It'll eventually hit over there in a certain number of turns. You can chuck your grenades. They have a certain amount of turn points that it takes for them to activate, and then you go and you use like Metal Gear's a foot to go and stomp everybody into that area of effect in order to be hit by both of those at the same time. Like, it's such a cool idea for a game, and again, could only have come out on the PSP because, again, just weird limitations makes them go into some weird ideas. But the library on this thing was insane. Not only did it have basically everything from the PS1, but quite a lot of PS2 titles ended up getting, if not direct ports, sort of sequels that they ended up getting on this thing that in many cases, again, just brought forward ideas that they meant to put in those original PS2 games. And it was good. It was a fantastic time. Like, I'm not even getting into the God of War stuff. I was never really much of a God of War guy myself, but people love to praise that one endlessly. You know, the insane amount of racing and fighting games that popped up on this thing. Like, for me, it was Armored Core, it was Tactics Ogre, it was Final Fantasy War of the Lions, which I still ended up going and getting the PS1 version and playing that instead. I did not like the PSP version of War of the Lions. But yeah, you know, like your Disgaea 2s and stuff like that, like the sheer library of this thing was, in my opinion, if I were to given a choice, like, you can only play one library forever, you can either play, you know, Switch or PSP, I would take PSP, like, full stop. Anyway, let's go ahead and continue on here. So, as far as all this went, this is all well and good, but eventually they needed to do a sequel, right? Actually, before we even get into this one, there's one more thing I want to mention about the PSP, which is actually going back to the hardware of the device itself, because we talked about its features, we did not talk about its security, by which I mean its actual physical design, okay? So check this out, because this is one of the coolest things to me, and part of the reason that I started repairing them as I did. Look at the shape of this thing, okay? Look at the shape, look at the profile of the buttons. If you've ever felt PSP buttons, have you ever wondered why they're so spongy? Have you ever wondered why it is that all the edges are rounded in such oddly specific ways? Because why it was that they opted for a smaller, lighter weight battery? Because this thing was designed like a cat, okay? It is designed to essentially take hits in places that they'll be ineffective, again, for actually damaging the thing. I have fixed quite a few PSPs over the years, and it always took something absolutely catastrophic to actually kill them. When it came to these devices, these shells, they actually had a pretty decent amount of space between the important components and the actual parts that could take some damage. All of the outer edges are rounded so that they end up deflecting away hits rather than taking them. The power cord is designed in such a way that it'll essentially end up either sticking on there and holding it firm where it is, or popping out if it ever ends up getting hit rather than destroying the port. In roughly, I'd say, like 15 years of fixing these things, I've only seen 2 ports actually get damaged, and that was actually due to corrosion because somebody let some water get in there. When it comes to the buttons themselves, they're very spongy because the only place that this thing can really be catastrophically damaged is on the screen. And if this thing lands flat on its screen, those spongy buttons will take that hit. And you might say, wait, that's hyperbole, that's stupid. That wouldn't happen. I had one of these ones that I had custom made. I had put an expanded battery on there, gave it a new shell, it was looking all nice and shiny, and then I forgot that I left it charging on the, like I have this little kind of bottom charging area near my desk, so I walk in to go sit down at my desk, I'm on my phone, and accidentally end up kicking the thing across the room, straight into a concrete wall. Now, do you think this thing was broken? Do you think I had to refix it all over again? Do you think this was like a Switch where I'd have to spend the next 2 weeks trying to figure out which one of the little tiny bits and pieces ended up breaking off on the inside and why there's a bunch of rattling inside? No. No, it was fine. It didn't take a scratch. It started up perfectly, it did everything normally, it didn't have damage to its screen or anything, because those spongy buttons are like a cat. It will catch that hit whenever they go flying. If it's anywhere else, it's perfectly fine. The disc tray on the back has plenty of space to the point that hitting it on the back won't do anything. These edges, the only time that you'll actually see any kind of damage, functionally speaking, on these edges is actually going to be either up here or right here, where those little nubs that stick out can get whittled down a little bit. If somebody tries to, like, jam a toothpick in here and pop these out, you can just pop them back in, but you never know the kinds of stuff people try to do these things. again, they are designed for travel. They are designed for taking abuse, and it shows. Because I used to joke for the longest time that, like, I don't know why they're making armor out of steel. They should make it out of PSPs. Like, this stuff is great. So yeah. The only time I've personally ever had one of these devices get dysfunctionally damaged, and it's a story I've shared a million times at this point, was when I was looking for my wife during Black Friday, and this guy was just like going full speed down a friggin' aisle at a Walmart, and ends up hitting me directly in the ribs. Basically, I have my PSP right there, and it's usually why I end up keeping it with the screen kind of facing my body there in my vest pocket. In that particular case, I just kind of had put it in my pocket and didn't realize that it flipped over, and yeah, he ended up hitting the corner of the cart straight into the screen, and it was still about a $20-$30 fix, and it was already good to go. I mean, the thing was already playing One Vision the next week. So anyways, yeah, these things are, again, made to take abuse, and that's actually why I'm bringing that up right before bringing up the Vita here. Because this is where Sony really did this thing dirty, where a lot of reviews did this thing dirty. Because really, the Vita was far more of a PSP successor than they tried to make it at the time. Like, they were trying to market it as this big, valuable, high-end, fancy MacGuffin kind of thing. This sucker was built for travel. It was built for basically every situation. Like, its battery life went from those 2 to 4 from before to like 10 plus, depending on the games you were playing. Those batteries that these Vitas launched with, both the 1000 and the 2000 models, they still hold up to this day. It's rare that you need a new battery for these things, because the batteries are just that good. They were built insanely strong. They have incredibly long battery life, and frankly, this is part of the important get up and go factor that I don't see out of the Switch, outside of the Switch Lite, that I guarantee we won't see out of the Switch 2, and actually is something that I've had as a bit of a gripe with the Steam Deck too, that they don't necessarily have that get up and go that these old smaller handhelds had. Being smaller, taking a smaller battery, and using less power, focusing on efficiency rather than raw power, meant that you, like, let's say you ended up forgetting to charge it for a couple of days, it still was working. You set it down to charge over the course of just getting ready to pack up and go, and it's already pretty much fully charged by the time you're ready to head out the door. These things charge really quickly. They again had incredible battery life. To this day, I still have my Vita that I carry around with me everywhere. It's one of the launch model ones. And these things absolutely, once again, are capable of taking abuse. The cool thing is, looking at the different components here, and I just noticed I have the wrong mouse that I'm pointing at stuff with. The cool thing about these is that they're actually sectioned off, kind of like the Switch was to some degree, but they're actually built in such a way that they can take hits from, again, just about everywhere. 3 separate sections, so if any particular board gets damaged, it's separated by its own board and a cable in between. When it comes to the outer edges, you can see, once again, very rounded, very slim profile. These sticks, they got a ton of crap for these sticks, and that annoys me to this day, because these sticks are incredible. They are smaller. Here's the shocking thing. This portable device is meant to be portable, which means that, for example, like a Switch Lite even, will get snagged on your pockets. Retroids get snagged on your pockets. All of these pocket devices, like outside of like the 3DS or something like that, get snagged in your damn pockets because they have rubberized, sticks that are there to function like, full-fledged controllers or something. But they stick to things. They attract things. They get jammed on things. And, well, shockingly enough, this means that they tend to break very often. And so in the case of the original Vita here, Hall effect sticks, immediately right out of the box, they just sprung for those. For those unfamiliar, this means that they are magnetic, which means that if, for example, they're damaged in any way, they get something in there, you're usually just a reset away and they're just working just fine again. In fact, my personal current Vita has one stick that looks like cauliflower from when I went and was fixing it up, because the previous owner seemingly had jammed it in a metal door, where it was enough to basically crack the device nearly in half, as well as turn one of those sticks, like it cracked the stick in half and turned it to cauliflower. And to this day, it still has that same stick, because I reset it, and the stick worked just fine, and I thought, wow, this looks cool as shit. I am keeping this, actually. As far as the actual screen and whatever else, all of this whole assembly is one chunk, kind of like a phone would be, which means that it is very protective. It's very good at taking knocks. Additionally, because of where the sticks are, like let's say there's hits coming across, those sticks are taking over for the spongy buttons of the PSP when it comes to actually kind of landing and taking those knocks. Everything else tends to lead to taking hits on these top bars or bottom bars. And again, those sections are made for taking damage. I think like 30 or so Vitas that I've fixed up at this point, from what I've seen, it basically took internal damage for them to actually die of anything. Everything else was just a quick cosmetic fix, because these screens, I shared the story a couple of years ago about a Vita 2000 I saw. Somebody dropped a dresser or something, apparently, like corner first on top of the thing. It was missing chunks out of its screen. I still have that screen with me because it physically did not have screen there, and the touchscreen still worked. Game still worked. Everything still worked. It was fully functional. I just put a screen protector on there so it wouldn't scratch my fingers, but like, the thing worked just fine. It's crazy just how durable these things are. And that's just due to layers, due to all of this being one solid chunk. And additionally, that focus on efficiency over raw power meant that everything is very tightly packed inside this device. All right? They don't heat up. That's one of those important things to mention here. They do not heat up. The Switch heats up. The Lite did a way better job in that particular regard. But they are always focusing on adding more cooling, adding more heat, adding more power, when at this point, yeah, these devices, they had a hard limit over exactly what they could do. That's not a bad thing. Again, as soon as you know where the wall is, you can start working your way around it. Like, for example, the fact that they've said for years, oh, nobody will ever be able to port a DS emulator over to the PS Vita. It simply doesn't have even anything close to the amount of power required. Nobody could ever do... Anyway, so I was playing some Pokemon Silver the other day on my Vita. Soul Silver, I should say. Granted, that emulator still ain't perfect. It's still an 0.61, but, like, it plays DS games. It's getting dramatically better with every new release. When it comes to what this device could do, that limit over how much power it could put out meant that people got a pretty good idea of how to actually port things to it, to the point that it's become an absolute port machine. You remember how I said we didn't get a San Andreas port back in the PSP? Well, people ported the mobile version over to the Vita, and by people, I mean that Reneganamonte, whatever, the Ren guy that does a lot of the PS Vita ports. Like, they managed to not only get the mobile version on there, but dramatically fix the mobile version to basically be a better version of the PS2 version with mod support. Okay? So, like, that's happening. You've got official PS2 ports coming in for like MGS 2 and 3, so we get the full versions of those at this point. Final Fantasy X. I got the Sly Cooper games. You got stuff from the PS3 even. Like the first game I got from my Vita was XCOM Enemy Unknown, and I love that thing. And that's actually one of those other details to bring up here, because when it comes to the Vita, it did a really solid job of picking the games that made sense in a mobile format. Like, technically speaking, from what I've heard, it might theoretically be possible to have XCOM 2 natively on a Vita. It's something that I played on Remote Play on the Vita. And here's the thing. It's, with the amount of particles and whatever else going on in that game, it's hard to tell what the hell's going on. When it comes to XCOM Enemy Unknown, perfect on a handheld. Absolute perfection. And that's oftentimes the thing. When I see the kids get excited over a Switch game, and we go and we try it out, and they try to play it on the road, and they're like, I can't see my Switch, can I please have my phone? There's your problem. I can still play my Vita just fine with whatever games are on it. When it comes to playing stuff like the Switch there, all that focus on like, oh, it can technically run this, that, or the other. Sure, those millions of particle effects may look very fancy on a big screen, but you're playing it on a handheld, accept your portability, So, anyway, sorry, it's just a bit of a frustration for me personally, because it's like, here's all of this amazing potential, and it's getting squandered because we're not thinking about making it for a handheld, So either way, as far as all that stuff goes, yes, smaller screen, technically yes, but very sharp screen on these devices. In fact, this going onto the whole remote play thing, this is actually one of those things that's kind of interesting. This would be the slim model, by the way. They made it a little bit thinner. They made the sticks a little bit worse, and then they put the two thingies on here. But with all of these different features, you might be wondering why it was that this thing didn't end up selling gangbusters when it did. Because remember, it does still have the video out thing. Once again, locked behind a frickin' dock that they never actually distributed. So, again, like, it had the ability to play these games locally. It had the ability to do a lot of great things with it. And then, yeah, just like those docks, the ability to connect to wireless controllers and stuff. Like, yeah, no, you're gonna need the dock for that. Where do I get the dock? We're just not gonna make them. So yeah, dumb decision there, but one of the main things that caused the Vita not to fly at the time was that somebody decided to do a corporate move and put in these M2 cards, which are notoriously prone to failure. Now, I've gotten comments in the past saying, oh, why do you always say that these things failed so much? Because I've had, I think, like 16 of these memory cards before. There's 2 that are still functional, so that would be why. Because I've gotten some that were new in the package. I had some that were far younger and whatever else, and it was the 8s that managed to survive. Every other size, for whatever reason, would constantly fail, and they would just sort of randomly fail. I don't know whether it was just a lack of some kind of a thing to prevent static electricity or what. Some people were claiming that rubbing magnets on there somehow fixed it. I've never seen that work, but whatever. More power to you, I guess. But these cards were extremely expensive, notoriously prone to failure, and difficult to find. So, yeah. So this is why, at this point, when you go and you get a Vita, you get an SD adapter, and guess what? It's freaking amazing, because you can put your entire library on there. You can put stuff that it never could play before on there. You can do all kinds of crazy goodness. Like my Vita currently is, essentially a Game Boy, Game Boy Color, SNES, NES, is like a freaking Game Gear for some reason too. Basically a Pocket PS2. There's literally only one PS2 game that I haven't gotten on there that I wish I had on there, which was Resident Evil Outbreak. But like everything, like this thing does everything. Hell, it even has Fallout 2 on there. And the thing to remember about this is that the reason that these failed was because a combination of those memory cards, a combination of the proprietary cord, which actually is not that bad. I personally am pretty okay with this thing using a proprietary cord. The way that they designed the 1000 one, it actually has a pretty cool feature in that the little nub will always be on the bottom, so if it's dark, you can just kind of like run your finger along it and you always know which way to actually plug the thing in. There are adapters out there to switch it to a USB-C. Honestly, I prefer the width of the cable on this one because it's a huge amount of contact area. It's not going to wiggle. It's very, very sturdy, which means, you won't accidentally knock your port sideways, which is one of the most annoying things to fix on handhelds, especially if you happen to have kids. Like, you'd much rather see the device take a hit on its side than take a hit on its power port, because that thing is going to be a pain to replace. Anyway, going back to the library, though. As I mentioned before, this thing basically continued on from where the PSP left off, having a bunch of really solid ports of a lot of old titles, collections of old games, again, MGS 2 and 3, your Sly Cooper games, stuff like that. Not to mention, it had a bunch of stuff that was once again good similes of stuff that we would later see on stuff like the Steam Deck that were good in a handheld format. Stuff like Salt and Sanctuary instead of stuff like Dark Souls. You still had the old PSP library there, obviously. Stuff like the Worm series would end up continuing on in this thing. Civilization tried to do this thing where they tried to do the Revolution series, which was like a handheld version of Civilization. Kind of hit or miss, but a cool attempt all the same. But either way, the library on these things, like, they had a lot of unique games that only ever came out on the Vita. A lot of the Vanillaware titles actually were specifically designed around the Vita. In fact, actually, Unicorn Overlord was apparently the first one that was... It actually originally started as a Vita thing and then transitioned to other stuff over time. So, I don't know, it just makes it a little bit more fun that you can still play this on a Vita to this point. I feel like a lot of the visuals of it still hold up on the device. But either way. So yeah. very defensive design, incredible battery life, still has the ability to do the whole docking thing if they just had actually released it with a dock. You still can use wireless controllers if you'd like. The internet connections are pretty darn great. Had a browser built in. The Switch still doesn't to this day. And again, all of the old Sony stuff that you kind of would expect. And here's one more thing about the library, though. Because when a lot of these games were re-released on PS4, PS5, that kind of thing, like a lot of the classics, one of the first things that we saw is that, sure, they had the option to go do the subscription model, but they also still had the option to go buy them. And additionally, if you already owned them before, in most cases, they still made it to your library. Like, I had Legend of Dragoon since the PSP days, and when they did an HD remaster of it, it showed up, it showed up on the PS4. So we know already that if they do make a Switch 2, or not a Switch 2, if they do make a Vita 2, there's a pretty decent chance that a lot of the stuff that you already own would probably be immediately available. Stuff like Jeanne d'Arc, which was a PSP game, ended up again getting an HD remaster on the PS4, and it was just immediately there. There are certain other exceptions where they did fully change some stuff. Like, for example, when I had Twisted Metal, that didn't end up getting pulled over in the transition, but that's mostly because they actually had to change a few things inside the game due to, I think it was like they couldn't technically use certain symbols in the original 90s release, so they had to re-release it slightly different, so it's technically a different ID on there. Same thing happened with, what the hell was it? With Armored Core, where like I owned, Armored Core since forever on the PSP. And when they recently had the kind of HD remasters of all of them, they technically are different. So stuff like, Phantasma and Master of Arena never actually made it to the PSN before. And even if you went and modified them and created your own versions, you would have had to do disc swaps, and they basically like combined all of them into one disc. So technically it was a different thing. So I understand what's going on there. But again, at least the effort is there for your old stuff to still stick around. Like the fact that I can still go onto a PSP and still download stuff to this day, and like again, they're still supporting that kind of stuff. The Vita store is still open to this day because every time that they've tried to close it, people have said, "Hey, no, please don't." They're like, "Okay, well, I guess we won't then." Even though it's probably not really bringing that much in at this point. But again, if they do make a Vita 2, like if they do make a Vita 2, I really hope that they retain the lessons that they got here. Because here, if I can find, I thought I had a picture of the portal up here somewhere. I guess not. Well, let's go ahead and pull up a picture of the portal here. So, this fugly bastard is not exactly what I would call a miracle device. So, okay, let's talk about the whole streaming thing here real quick, okay? Because when it comes to the portal, it actually is more or less bringing one feature over from the Vita and just basically making that its own device, and that is the whole streaming thing. So the PS Vita could already stream things comfortably to the handheld, and the funny thing is, because it is a lower resolution, because it's not trying to do the big fancy thing, which funnily enough, stuff like Killzone was kind of lauded for its fancy graphics at the time. But this fugly bastard over here was essentially just doing the streaming thing, but it connects to a PS5, which is all well and good and whatever. But when it comes to the actual streaming side of things, I generally found that the Vita was a lot more cozy. Like, granted, this is secondhand knowledge because I don't ever plan to own one of these awful-looking things, but when it came to streaming and whatnot, your phone's Wi-Fi hotspot is pretty darn good at this point, which means that if you have your PS4 on sleep mode, you can just connect via Wi-Fi and have access to your PS4 library on your Vita to this day with a relatively iffy internet connection. It functions just fine, especially if you're playing strategy games and stuff. You can barely tell the difference that it ain't native. So it's, again, just that small screen, that small resolution that just happens to have a really sharp screen in front of it. That's, again, to its benefit. It's, again, going for lower specs but higher functionality, as it were. So I'm really hoping that they keep that lesson, that they stick to something that is technically less powerful, but doesn't require cooling, that manages to stay cool, that manages to still stay stable. The fact that they're not heating up and cooling down all the time means that there's less stress on those components, which is part of the reason that these devices held up so dang well over the years. Because again, they're not constantly expanding and contracting. Every time that I've opened up a Switch, there have been pieces broken off on the inside. Every time that I've opened up a Vita, it has been completely just in one chunk. Every time I've opened a PSP, it's the same thing. It's all stable. It doesn't move. It doesn't need thermal paste. It's all just good. All right. And last thing I just want to bring up here is actually when it comes to load times, of all things. So for that, I'm actually just going to go ahead and dig out my my Vita here real quick, just so I can show this to you real quick. But the benefit of building for a sort of handheld-centric mindset here is that you end up getting a very quick response time out of your games in a lot of cases. Like, let's say it's really cool to be able to play like a Risk of Rain 2 or something like that on a Switch Lite, and I kept around a Switch Lite for a while so that I could go and play around with it, you know, get a general feel for the device, see if I can appreciate it a bit more than I currently do. And sure enough, I did end up liking the device to some degree, but every time that I found, like, hey, here's this cool thing that I love playing on this device, it then immediately was followed up with, well, then here's all the compromises, you know? So here, let's go ahead and pull up the Vita here. And so, like, let's say going down the list here, like Risk of Rain 2, it takes roughly 5 minutes to actually launch the dang game, right? And as cool as it would be to run it on something like this, also at the same time, I could just be like, oh wait, Risk of Rain 1, how long does that take to launch? Oh, I don't know, let's take like 10 seconds probably. So it does all of its intro, startup windows, and whatever else. It does its logo, and then we're pretty much immediately into the game. All right, we're already ready to go. Just skip through the stuff there, and we're already ready to start. Go down, go to play, and we're already in a game. Right? The pick up and go factor is really important here. So, like, technically, yes, this will be a kind of a weaker experience compared with Risk of Rain 2 or whatever. But on a handheld like this is what I want. This is the kinds of things that I want to be considered whenever I'm actually going and, you know, picking up a handheld, as it were. Because it's meant to be a handheld. It is designed to be a handheld. And I'm just going to hit the wrong button, apparently. Anyway. So that's the thing. Like, let's say something like the Definitive Edition over on San Andreas. That shit takes, like, several minutes to launch from what I've heard. The original PS2 version takes several minutes to launch from what I've heard. How did it launch on the PS Vita? Which, by the way, there will be a brief visual glitch, because if you're using video out while using San Andreas here, it'll turn purple for a second. Anyway, let's let it do its thing. There we go, as it's booting up, and so we just go to resume, and how long is this going to take to launch? Well, let's see. There's that entire bar. You know how this thing used to take several minutes to go and load up back on the PS2 or, you know, Switch or what have you? Well, there we go. We're basically already good to go. We're most of the way there, and you're going to go ahead and get stuck at 80% apparently because it's deciding to be funky like that. And anyways, we're already good to go. So, either way, like, I love this stuff. I love the fact that you can just do this all on this little handheld. This is part of the reason that this thing, to this day, remains my favorite handheld of all time. Yes, I have a Steam Deck, and it's all well and impressive and everything, but also, like, dude, this is awesome. That's less awesome, but alright. I'm surprised that didn't go worse, actually. Also, apparently, they just don't care anymore. I don't know what just happened there exactly. Oh, now they care. I see. Alright, well, quick. Minions. Minions, no, come back. I need my minions. Here. You join, you join, you join. There we go. Go solve my problems for me, would you? Okay. So, like, being able to play San Andreas, again, you can add mods and things to it on the go. Like, that's just freaking awesome to me. A lot of the ports that end up coming out to this thing, honestly, I have no idea how they ever even pulled them off. You got Bully on this thing at this point. You got a bunch of mobile games that, or I guess mobile ports of existing games. I was hoping that Into the Breach would make it, but apparently it's not compatible. It has to use specific architectures and whatnot. But either way, Like, it's been an absolute port machine, which I really love. Also, an oddly specific feature, a challenge run that I actually plan to do down the road at some point. In this version, you can actually specifically select to turn off your auto aim entirely. So if you wanted to have, all of your targeting set to specifically manual, that is that is something I plan to do at some point. That is something that was previously locked to the PC version, something you couldn't really do in the other versions there. So I'm curious to see how that'll end up playing out. But yeah, that's a challenge run for down the road. Probably going to be maybe combining that with the bicycle only challenge. But yeah, this thing plays beautifully. It's just one of those beautiful nostalgic things, you know? Like, this thing manages to deliver more nostalgia per minute than anything I've ever seen. I mean, even when it comes to old, like, emulation and whatnot, it's just crazy what they've achieved at this point. So, like, the N64 runs on this thing, I doubt we'll ever see an official thing on that. GBA, obviously, stuff like that. DS, as I mentioned earlier. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Technically, if I want to have access to my Steam library, I can just go through Moonlight. Like, this thing is just pure magic. I mean, hell, the supposedly definitive version of Sonic 3 and Knuckles here, the Air mod, instead of being an app for PC, can also just be launched on this thing. The improved versions of, like, Sonic 1 and 2, the, God, what are they called? I forget what ports they were, but you can get those moved onto here. The greatest mod you will ever see in the form of Tactics Ogre 1 Vision, obviously, is available on this thing as well. So, anyways, that's what I wanted to get across here. Obviously, this is going to be a modded version, so it's going to have a few extra features, but when it came to the original thing, that focus on efficiency over everything else, that focus on efficiency and stability, good, durable design on the device, I hope that's what they end up keeping forward. Because they had an excellent library, they had absolutely excellent design in terms of the devices themselves, they were very defensively built, they were very sturdy, they were very reliable. And they still remain reliable to this day. It's why I keep working on them, it's why I keep loving these things, and it's why, if there ever is a Vita 2, which there dang well better be, I think it actually has a pretty good shot of unseating the Switch 2 at this point, because their release immediately kind of got dumped on with all of a sudden price increases, and if Sony is working on a handheld like this, if they are working on something like this for the future, that timing might be completely all just green lights all the way right now, because that could not be better. Like, I've always preferred the Sony lineup as far as lineups went, and yes, I am specifically leaving it on Armored Core because they left a Daemon X Machina thing for the Switch too. Fight me, Armored Core will always be better. Like, just take a Vita 2 and let it have the PSP library on release. Let it play old PSP games, and there you go. It's already beating the Switch lineup by far. So yeah, that's about that. I mean, I would love to see Resident Evil Outbreak end up getting a remake for a Vita 2. That would probably be like the ultimate wet dream as far as handhelds go. That was one of those things that almost made me keep the Retroid Pocket 2, was that it could play Outbreak on the go. But the analog sticks on that thing pissed me off. Man, I hate when they use full-size analog sticks on a handheld. It's just... Like, look, the Vita sticks, they do feel like they're a little bit flimsier, but they are a lot more durable than the Switch sticks. They're a lot better than they get credit for. I mean, again, to this day, I've replaced basically every stick on my kids' Switches. This thing is still using its original launch sticks from over a decade ago. Anyway, so, y'all have yourselves a good one. I hope this was at least an interesting little rant here. And what do you think? Will we see a Vita 2? Will the Switch 2 even come close to meeting the Switch 1 with its, frankly, I still think the price is insanely high. Yes, development prices have gone up for sure, but also Nintendo's thing was to be the cheap thing, and they have not lived up to that for a while. And if they're just going to go and directly compare themselves to Steam like that, my dude, I can get basically almost every game on the Switch for like a tenth of the price on the Steam Deck. Not to mention the device is almost half as much depending on which version you're getting at what time, and how much of all of this orange cloud situation ends up affecting them price-wise. Anyways, that's about that. So, y'all have yourselves a good one, take care, and, I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Oh, actually, wait, shoot, before I forget, people keep reminding me to do that whole thing of, like, you're supposed to go press some bell or something. I keep forgetting that that's a thing you're supposed to remind people to do. It's almost like I'm bad at this YouTube thing or something. Anyway, okay, so, y'all take care. If there's a bell or something, I guess you're supposed to press it. Okay, see ya, bye.